Buckle up, everybody, because today's deep dive is going to be wild. We've got market mayhem, potential ceasefires in the Middle East, corporate accounting scandals, some serious banking drama going down in Europe, and we'll even touch on how media in Australia is being reshaped, plus a certain billionaire is making some big bets on Bitcoin and philanthropy.
Yeah, it's crazy how all these stories from different parts of the world actually connect.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to uncover today, how a decision in one place can cause ripples everywhere else.
So let's kick things off with a market tremor that shook things up globally. The US Treasury saw a surge, and 10-year yields took a nosedive like a full-on 11 basis point drop. What's happening?
Well, it seems like the markets are reacting to President Trump's pick for Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. And, this wasn't exactly expected, but Wall Street seems to be pretty happy about it.
Why all the excitement about Bessent, though?
Well, Bessent is known for being a bit more moderate when it comes to trade and those fiscal policies. The market sees him as someone who can maybe balance out some of Trump's more, aggressive stances, especially on tariffs. With all this trade tension with China especially, this appointment seems to be calming things down a bit.
So this isn't just good news for the US, it's impacting markets worldwide.
Oh, absolutely. The dollar's gotten weaker, the euro's gaining strength, and Asian markets are rallying. It looks like with Bessent in the picture, the world's feeling a little more optimistic about how the global economy is going to play out.
It's like everyone was holding their breath and now they can finally exhale. There's definitely a sense of relief, but still some uncertainty, of course.
Exactly. Ian Lingott over at BMO Capital Markets summed it up pretty well. He said even though Bessent's appointment doesn't completely get rid of risks like trade wars and tariffs, it does make those more extreme scenarios seem less likely, and that alone is giving the bond market some comfort.
Now, shifting gears from global markets, let's look at the Middle East. There's talk of a potential ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, mediated by the US.
This is a tricky situation for sure. The proposed ceasefire involves a 60-day truce, Hezbollah pulling back north of the Litani River, and the Lebanese army taking control of the border.
We're hearing a lot of different opinions on this. The Israeli ambassador to the US is pretty optimistic, even saying we're close to a deal. But then you've got Israel's national security minister, who's way more hawkish, seeing a truce as a missed chance to take Hezbollah down completely.
Right. It's important to remember this is a very fluid situation. The ambassador says a ceasefire could happen fast, even within days. But there are still some really important details they need to work out.
And this uncertainty is impacting oil prices. Brent and WTI crude have both dropped quite a bit.
That's right. The possibility of less conflict in the Middle East usually calms oil prices down. The perceived risk to supply goes down, and the markets reflect that.
Well, from geopolitical tension, we move to corporate turmoil. Macy's, the iconic American department store, has put its earnings report on hold because of some accounting problems. And the cause? One employee intentionally hiding a ton of delivery expenses.
It really makes you think about internal controls and how even big companies can be vulnerable. This one employee managed to hide a whopping $154 million in delivery expenses, and they did this over multiple quarters. It's mind-blowing.
It's a huge cover-up. The CEO is trying to downplay it, saying it won't affect their cash flow or payments to vendors. But this has to be a big hit to their credibility.
No doubt. And it brings up a growing problem in the U.S., the lack of qualified accountants. The Wall Street Journal has been reporting on this, pointing to fewer people going into accounting programs and a bunch of people retiring.
So we have this giant company dealing with the fallout from one employee's actions, and it ties into a bigger issue that could affect even more companies down the line.
It's a worrying trend. This shortage of accountants could lead to more mistakes, oversights, and maybe even more cases of deliberate wrongdoing. It's something investors and regulators need to keep a close eye on.
Speaking of risky moves, let's hop over to Europe, where the Italian banking giant UniCredit has made a bold move. They've put in a bid for Banco BPM for a cool 10.1 billion euros.
Now, this is interesting because it's an unsolicited all-stock offer. UniCredit went straight for it. No formal invitation from Banco BPM.
So what's the plan for UniCredit's CEO, Andrea Orcel? What's he trying to do?
His goal is pretty clear. He wants to create the biggest bank in Italy by taking advantage of this trend of banks merging. This isn't Orcel's first rodeo either. He tried to buy Commerzbank in Germany before, but it didn't work out.
So he's back in the game this time on Italian turf.
Exactly. And whether this bid succeeds or not will have a big impact on the Italian banking scene. Could even set off more mergers across European finance. It's a high-stakes chess match, and we'll see who wins.
Now let's head down under to Australia, where the government is wrestling with the power of tech giants like Meta and Google and how they're changing the media landscape. This all started when Meta decided to stop funding deals with Australian publishers.
It's complicated, and the Australian government is trying different things to deal with it. They're thinking about a levy on digital platforms, which would send some money back to publishers. And they're also looking at giving more support to public interest journalism.
It's a power struggle between the government and these tech giants. And it's not just about money. The Australian government is even thinking about a pretty bold move, a law to ban anyone under 16 from using social media.
Yeah, that's definitely controversial. The tech companies are pushing back, of course. It raises a lot of questions about online freedom, parents' rights, and what the government's role should be in regulating the digital world.
It's like a mini version of a global debate.
Yeah.
How do we balance the economic power of these platforms with the need for a diverse and healthy media? And what happens when we restrict access, especially for young people?
Tough questions. And Australia is leading the charge in trying to find answers. What they decide could set the stage for other countries dealing with the same issues.
Now let's zoom out from the media and look at the Australian economy as a whole. Deloitte Access Economics just put out some updated forecasts, and it's not looking so sunny.
They're predicting a bigger deficit, less company tax revenue, and a growing national debt compared to the GDP. All these things point to some potential trouble for the Australian economy over the next few years.
Of course, the treasurer is trying to be positive, saying the budget's still in better shape than when they took over. But Catherine Lee, a partner at Deloitte, gave a pretty serious warning about the politics of inflation. She thinks these economic problems could become a big political issue leading up to the 2025 election.
It's a good reminder that economic data isn't just numbers. It affects real people, and it often gets tangled up with political agendas.
It's this complicated dance between what's actually happening in the economy and how politicians try to handle it. How they respond will directly affect people's lives in Australia.
And this is something we see all over the world. Countries are trying to figure out how to deal with economic uncertainty and plan for the future.
From political maneuvering, we jump to a high-stakes gamble in the world of cryptocurrency. MicroStrategy has bought a ton of Bitcoin, showing they really believe in this digital asset.
They got a whopping 500 Bitcoins for 5.4 billion US dollars. And what's even more interesting is they did it when Bitcoin was trading near its all-time high. It's a bold move that shows how much they're committed to Bitcoin.
It's like they're going all in, right? They already had a lot of Bitcoin and now they're adding to it, even though a lot of people are wondering if this Bitcoin bubble is about to burst.
The brains behind this Bitcoin strategy is MicroStrategy CEO Michael Saylor. He's been a big supporter of cryptocurrency for a long time. He's betting big that Bitcoin will become the future of finance, a decentralized system that could totally change the global economy.
It's definitely a high-risk, high-reward situation. If Bitcoin keeps going up, MicroStrategy could make a fortune. But if it crashes, they could lose a lot. We'll have to see how this all plays out.
It's a fascinating case study, not just for finance, but for risk-taking and how new technologies can shake things up. It makes us think about the future of money, how technology shapes global markets, and how finance is changing.
Speaking of shaping the future, let's end this part of our deep dive with a story about legacy and giving back. Warren Buffett just donated a big chunk of Berkshire Hathaway shares to some family foundations.
It's a big act of generosity. Buffett gave away 1.14 billion US dollars worth of shares. He's been committed to giving back for a long time, and this is just another example of that.
This donation's going to several foundations. The Susan Thompson Buffett Foundation, the Sherwood Foundation, the Howard Buffett Foundation, and the Novo Foundation. Each of these supports a bunch of causes, from education and fighting poverty to social justice and helping developing countries.
This approach says a lot about Buffett's philosophy. He wants to empower others to tackle big social problems. By spreading his wealth across different foundations, he's hoping to make the biggest impact possible.
It's also interesting to think about this donation alongside Buffett's decision to take his money out of the Gates Foundation after he dies. Instead, he's letting his kids run a new charitable trust, keeping his philanthropic legacy within the family.
It shows that even the most successful people care about leaving the world a better place. Buffett's actions show how wealth can be used to create positive change and inspire others to give back. And what's really interesting is that Buffett made this donation while he's still actively involved in his philanthropy.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's different from what he's doing with the Gates Foundation, where the money goes there after he's gone. It seems like he wants to be more hands-on with these family foundations.
Right. And we can't forget just how much wealth Buffett has. He's already given away a lot of his Class A shares over the years, but he's still worth like a crazy 150.2 billion US dollars. This recent donation is just one part of a much bigger plan as he figures out how to use his money for good.
He even said that giving away all his massive wealth might take longer than his kids' lifetimes. That's a pretty wild thought. Makes you wonder what the long-term impact will be.
It definitely does. It makes you think about how wealth gets passed down through generations, the responsibilities that come with it, and how it could affect future generations, both good and bad. Buffett seems to really understand all of this, and he's trying to be careful about it.
Well, we've covered a lot today, haven't we? From market freakouts and Middle East peace talks to corporate scandals and the whole world of philanthropy. It's been a whirlwind tour of what's happening around the globe and how it's all connected.
It's amazing how all these stories that seem so different are actually woven together, you know? They each show something about the forces shaping our world, the decisions people are making, and how those decisions can affect things far and wide.
So what does all this mean for you? What stood out to you as the most surprising or impactful thing that happened today? And what kind of ripple effects do you think it might have?
Think about the power of individual actions. A new Treasury secretary calms the markets down. A single employee causes chaos in a big company. A billionaire uses his fortune to try and solve global problems. Every action can create change sometimes in ways we don't even expect.
We've only just scratched the surface here, and we encourage you to keep digging deeper, connect the dots, and come to your own conclusions. Because the more you know, the better prepared you'll be to navigate this complex world that's always changing. It's really something, isn't it? How these stories show that even with all this global stuff happening and markets going up and down, a single person's choices can still make a huge difference.
Absolutely. It's like a reminder that we're not just watching this complex system play out, we're all part of it. And every choice we make, every action we take can set off a whole chain of events with consequences we might not even see coming.
When you think about those individual actions, it's striking that what that Macy's employee did had really negative consequences. But then you have people like Warren Buffett whose choices are driving positive change through his philanthropy.
Exactly. It's so interesting to compare those stories. On the one hand, you see the potential for disruption, even harm, when someone's acting out of self-interest. But then you have Buffett's dedication to giving back. It shows how one person's choices can create this ripple effect of positive change.
And his approach to philanthropy is really something, spreading his wealth across all those different foundations.
It is. It shows he really gets how complex these social challenges are.
Yeah.
By supporting a wide range of organizations, he's acknowledging that there's no single solution to problems like poverty, inequality, or global health.
And his decision to shift away from the Gates Foundation after he's gone, putting his kids in charge of a new charitable trust, it makes you think about legacy and how wealth gets passed down through generations.
For sure. It seems like he wants to keep that personal connection to his philanthropy, making sure his values and vision continue to guide how his money is used even after he's gone.
It's like a reminder that legacy isn't just about the money itself. It's about the impact it makes and the values it represents. And what Buffett's doing definitely gets people talking about the responsibility that comes with having that much wealth.
You got it. It's not just about writing checks. It's about actively shaping the world you leave behind. And in a way, that's a challenge for all of us, not just billionaires. We all have a legacy to build a contribution to make, no matter what we have.
That's a powerful thought. We might not all be able to donate billions, but we can all find ways to make a difference. To use what we have, our talents and resources, to be a part of something bigger.
Exactly. And that's what makes doing these deep dives so great.
Yeah.
It's not just about learning information. It's about thinking about things differently, starting conversations, and encouraging everyone to think about what role they play in this interconnected world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we hope you'll keep exploring these stories, connecting the dots, and thinking about what they mean for your own life and the choices you make. Because in the end, it's those individual choices, big and small, that shape the world we live in and the world we leave behind.
Stay curious, keep asking questions, and remember, each of us can make a difference. Until next time.